Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the tier list for the 919 support. So as always, you can find timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole video. I also have this Google Doc in the description, so you can follow along if you'd like. I do have, for each one of the champions we're going to talk about, if you click on it, another little mini Google Doc. And that will show you recommended runes, recommended items, and then I have a 5-point rating system here. 1 means that the champion is one of the worst at that task for a support, and 5 means the champion is one of the best for a support. So lane pressure is how likely is the champion able to get priority in the lane. Kill threat is how likely is the champion able to force kills or assists. Safety is how safe is the champion, particularly from ganks during the laning phase. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time. Then reliability is how likely is it that someone can play this champion at a high level over many games. So part of that is how difficult is the champion mechanically and in terms of decisions. Then also how well does the champion fit into the overall meta. Are there a lot of counter picks out there for the champion? And we're going to be using Lolalytics and mostly some u.gg just to look at different builds that are out there, different statistics, and we'll use the league wiki as well just to kind of go through some of the champions' basic abilities and just sort of explain like what's changed over time, why is the champion strong or weak right now in the current meta. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the top 10, but I will also mention a little bit about the top 5 as we go on. Okay, so as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. And then stay tuned for other tier lists as well. I'm going to be doing 80 carry definitely, and I'm going to see if I can do 1 or 2 different tier lists as well. I looked over what's projected to be on the patch notes for Surrender at 20. It doesn't look like any of that is going to impact support too much. And so I'm going to go ahead and release this before the patch notes come out. That way I'll have more time to release the other tier lists around the time that the patch drops as well. So I'm just trying to give you as much content as I possibly can around the patch release. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so I just wanted to talk really quickly about some of the meta shifts, and this is something that I've noticed over the past few days that has been kind of building up over the last patch or two, so maybe I'm like 1 patch late on this trend or so, but I think it is something that's fairly new. It's not like super popular right now, but it's just something that I've noticed over time. So I think that the enchanters are actually coming back, and they're quite strong right now. I mean, we've known that Janna has been one of the highest win rate champions for multiple patches now. And then Soraka has been creeping up a lot. Nami's been pretty high as well. And I just kind of brushed off a lot of this too. Well, they're pretty easy to execute. Like Rakan is difficult to play. So, that's why Rakan's not going to have a high win rate. And I do think that Rakan is still probably the best overall right now if you're really good on him. But I do think that the enchanters are going to be a bit stronger overall than other hard engaged champions such as Nautilus and Leona if played properly. And I think there are several things that are going on there why the enchanters are suddenly becoming stronger, and potential new like build and rune path that I think will make them even better into a lot of these popular matchups in the bot lane. We'll talk about that when we get into the actual champions, kind of this new Guardian themed build. Not new. I know there'll be someone's like, ha, I've been doing that for like 6 months. But specifically, a couple of things that I think have changed that have made that build even more viable than it used to be. But first of all, in terms of meta shift, there have been nerfs to a lot of kind of the 1v9 champions that have been plaguing solo queue over the last year or so. So like Akali has been nerfed, Silas has been nerfed numerous times, Aatrox has been nerfed numerous times. And then we've seen some nerfs to Riven, although Riven is getting arguably a buff on this patch. That's not going to matter for most like non-one-trick Riven players. And even over that time period, we've seen nerfs to things like Camille, Fiora, just a lot of kind of these 1v9 champs. Now, there are still some out there. Silas has still been pretty strong, and there are some other, like Jax is a real problem right now. Kha'Zix is a real problem. So there are some 1v9 champs, but overall, it feels like there's less of that. And people are playing some more role player type of champs. We're seeing more like Mundos, Malphites, just stuff like that. That's like Darius, Renekton, things that aren't usually going to 1v9 carry games, but are still like pretty good in the laning phase. So that means that games are slowing down just a little bit right now, and comebacks are a lot more possible because there aren't as many 1v9s. So there's still quite a lot out there, but it's kind of trending down a little bit, I think. There's less damage coming out of the jungle with everyone except for Kha'Zix right now. We're seeing more Mundo, Gragas, Nunu, like all of these are some of the most popular junglers. Not necessarily most popular, but highest win rate junglers. We're starting to see some of the tanks come back a little bit with like Mundo definitely being one of the most popular ones, but then Nunu, even after the nerf, still pretty good. Volibear, seeing some of that. Vi. We're even seeing a little bit more like Zax and Jaxes and things like that coming out of the jungle. So not as much pressure in the early game. The only thing that's like really sort of creating a lot of problems in the early, like Lee, a lot of the enchanters are very good against Lee. Kha'Zix is a huge problem, so if you do play an enchanter, I might actually consider banning this guy. He's really, really strong right now, and he's very difficult to deal with because of his invisibility. Jarvan can be kind of strong early, but there is counterplay to him, especially with champions like Janna. Kayn is sort of a problem, but he can take a little while to get going. Elise is not that great in solo queue. Under Diamond, she's okay. Silas is getting nerfed on this patch, and then you've got stuff like Gragas, who is okay. So, and I know Eve, a lot of people have said, oh, Eve is super OP on this patch. She's ridiculous. It's like she's got under a 50% win rate. She's okay. If she gets fed, she can be pretty good, but there is counterplay to her a lot of the time. So, we are seeing just slowing down a little bit in terms of jungler, which is helping out. Less early game damage bot lane. So that's something that has definitely been going on over the past few patches, is like the most popular champions. Caitlyn has been edging up a little bit in terms of popularity, but she still doesn't she does mostly poke, and a lot of these champions like Soraka, Nami, Sona, a lot of these, even Rakan, can deal with her poke, and a lot of people just are not that great on Caitlyn early. Some people are good on her, but it's poke, it's not a lot of burst. So, and like the top two champs right now mostly will be getting tier as part of their first item, so they are very weak in the early game. And then Vayne is always popular, and she's pretty weak in the early game too. Now we are seeing kind of an uptick in Lucian and Jhin, and those are still like pretty good aggressive early game champs. Xayah is kind of a mix, Jinx is a mix, but we're just not seeing, you know, as many things like Draven, Misfortune, and then things like Lucian have been nerfed, you know, over time, although recently he's coming back a little bit. So I just think, especially with Kai'Sa and Ezreal being the most popular ones, that you're kind of getting a free laning phase a lot of the time. And so that helps out enchanters a lot, because you do not want to see things like Draven, Zyra, or Leona, Jhin, you know, that type of stuff if you're trying to play Soraka, for example. So it's really nice that it's just kind of like a lot of farm off lanes early. A lot of the top laners are not playing, you know, the very heavy, super, like, ultra split push champs. You're seeing some of that, but it's a lot less of that than there has been recently. So, you're seeing a lot more, like, Darius and Renekton type of top lanes who are good in lane, but then they just do not split as well, and they really want to try to team fight later on. Pantheon's a great example of this. Super popular early, but not an ultra powerhouse split pusher late game. Same thing with Mordekaiser. Like, those champs can be dealt with. So, like, having those types of things in the top lane instead of Irelia, instead of Akali, just means that there are going to be a lot more team fights than there will be split pushing as a major win condition. And that's something that enchanters are really, really good at. So, yes, Jax is one of the main offenders here, who's still really popular and is still really OP top lane. Fiora, to a lesser extent, is somewhat popular and a pretty good split pusher. Riven's still going to be in there. You're still going to see some Irelias. But I'm just saying, you're seeing a lot more Darius's, Renektons, Pantheons, stuff like that top lane. That's really good for enchanters. And then finally, although I think enchanters are coming up, although they have a high win rate, they still don't have a very high pick rate. And that's important to note here, is that the most popular pick champions are things like Thresh, Pyke, Nautilus, Rakan, Leona, Morgana, and all of these do not... Rakan does scale pretty well, but the rest of them don't really scale that well. They don't scale with AP, they don't scale with plus healing and shielding, and so if you could just survive the laning against them and get to like 2 or 3 items, you're going to outscale them big time, with the exception of Pyke. If Pyke gets a lot of kills, he can scale really heavily. But a lot of these other champs are very early game focused, and if you play something that scales super well with healing, or something that peels really well like a Janna, these champs, it's very hard to deal with her as these champs as the game goes on. So that's just kind of the meta. Is looks like overall in pretty much every lane, damage is down a little bit, scaling is down a little bit, at least in the early to mid game. So you're getting like more time to build up as an enchanter. So I think that's one major thing that's going on in general to kind of create this shift where you're starting to see enchanters move up in the win rates a little bit. So a lot of people aren't onto this right now. You know, if we look at pick rates, Janna, or I guess Nami's kind of the most popular one, and then it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, she's like the 6th person down. Now, Morgana can be an enchanter, but I don't really consider her an enchanter because her cooldowns are so long, and she just doesn't scale as well as these other champs with plus healing and shielding. But yeah, I think that's going to be one of the major shifts. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about the champions here. I don't want this to be too long. Let's see if we can aim for 30 to 45 minutes. But Rakan's still going to be number 1. I think overall, I'm not going to talk a ton about him. It's just because I've been playing him a lot over the last couple of months. But I'll just hit the highlights really quick for people that are like new to the channel. Let me pull up his wiki here. So the main thing with Rakan is he is really good engage with his ult plus W, but when he goes in, he can also get back out with his shield. That's really the huge thing, is he can engage, but he can also get back out, and he scales really well with plus healing and shielding because he has one of the best shields in the game. So this shield, when you apply it twice, if you allow the first one to break and then you reapply it, then it has a 280 base with a 1.6 AP ratio on a 12-second cooldown. So that's better than even Janna's shield. A benefit of this and a problem is that it gives you a jump. So it allows you to dash multiple times if you want in a fight, which gives you a lot of mobility, but you have to get in close. So that's something that can be dangerous in certain comps. So if it's against a Malphite or something like that, and you try to go in close with your E, he can ult you and knock both you and your AD carry up. So that can be a big problem. Or if there's a lot of AoE going on in a fight, right? If you try to E in and like Darius applies a lot of bleed to you, or Renekton stuns you, or, you know, Orianna hits you with her ult, or, you know, Jarvan dunks you, or whatever, it can create a lot of problems. So if you have to get in close, if it's like a big like team fight with a lot of AoE damage flying around, you could potentially get hit by some of that stuff. Whereas someone like a Janna shield can stay pretty far out with her 800 range. So that is really nice with him. He can go in, your team doesn't follow up, whatever, you go back out with your E. He's one of the only champions that can do that. Has the plus healing and shielding scaling, can hit multiple targets with his quickness. Also, you know, just has 3 dashes just for escaping a lot of stuff. You know, you have your W, you can dash over walls. You also have your E, so you can jump to allies. And then you have your ult, so you can run really fast. So he's really hard to catch out when you're trying to rotate, even if you get spotted by a jungler or somebody else. So he's very, very good at rotations, and he's pretty good at like repositioning in fights. It's just he has to get in pretty close to do a lot of his stuff. Between his quickness and his shield, he needs to get in close. And he is relatively squishy. His base stats are fairly low. You know, his base armor is 32, his base health is 540. So if you get CC chained, especially against something like a Leona or a Nautilus, this is going to feel really bad, because you can get locked up and deleted. So that is a problem with him. And the fact that, you know, as we just discussed, champions like Nautilus, champions like Leona are super popular right now. And Malphite is pretty popular right now. Stuff like that. It makes it a lot tougher on him. So I do still think that he's probably number 1, but it is a tough matchup into a lot of these top level picks. Thresh is also someone that's a tough matchup if the Thresh is good, because he can flay back your W. And then if he lands the hook on you, like a lot of times you can get away, but if he's a really good Thresh, he'll wait until you try to dash, and then he'll flay you back in. So Thresh is kind of a tough matchup. Nautilus is a tough matchup, and Leona is a tough, and Morgana is a nightmare matchup. So like he really doesn't want to go against at least 4 of these top 5 champions. Besides him, top 5 most popular champions. And, you know, Pyke's not really a walk in the park. He's someone you don't really want to go against either. So it's like he's not that great against most of the other top champions. You can outplay him, but it's definitely a skill matchup most of the time, and often it's something that you are slightly going to be unfavored in, just because they can CC chain you. Now, with his runes, you know, I do still recommend getting Unflinching and Legend Tenacity most of the time. That's going to give you a lot of tenacity so that you get to ignore CC. But remember that tenacity has a minimum 0.5 seconds, so you can't completely remove tenacity. So when you're talking about these champions like Leona and Nautilus that apply numerous pieces of CC in a row, including Nautilus, a knock-up does not get reduced by tenacity. So when you get knocked up for like a second and a half off of the Nautilus, or I guess you get knocked up for 1 second, and then you get stunned for an extra half a second when you land, none of that's going to get reduced because the knock-up's going to happen. Tenacity does not reduce that. And then the half second when you land, you're still going to be stunned. And then when he auto attacks you, that's going to be a root for 0.75 seconds. That's not going to get reduced very much. And then, he can also hook you on top of that, which is going to displace you and stun you for an extra half a second there. So all of his stuff just conveniently gets around tenacity, which is really frustrating. And then Leona is a very similar thing. She hits you with the E. You're going to be rooted for half a second. She Qs you. You're going to be stunned for a second, and then she stuns you again with her ult. That's going to be another 1.5 second stun. So your tenacity is really not going to do a lot there. So tenacity, pretty good against things like Morgana, Bind, or Ash Arrow, like these really long individual single pieces of CC. When they're chaining together a whole bunch of different pieces of CC, you can still get locked up. So that's pretty rough. Now, if you aren't facing something that has a lot of CC, so if you're facing like a Janna where tenacity doesn't do anything against her, then you can take something like Revitalize instead, and that'll help you out a lot. So I think he is still good. I think he is, still one of the top tier supports. Like I said, you do always have some outplay potential. Meant to change this here over to Nomad. You do still have some outplay potential, but there are some matchups that are definitely going to be somewhat difficult for you over time. Even though you're going to outscale a lot of these champs because you can get things like Ardent Sensor, things like Zeke's, and you have like really nice AP scaling, it's still going to be a little bit rougher. Now, I recommend going over to Nomads most of the time, and I go back and forth on this a lot. But the thing is, Nomads just gives you that guaranteed wards by 9 or 10 minutes, is going to allow you to really keep tabs on that jungler, and that's the most important thing, because they will camp you. It is going to be 4v2 bottom in many of your games, and you don't know where that jungler is and what he's doing. So you need those wards ASAP. And so that's why I think Nomads is most important. Yes, you are giving up a little bit of damage in the early game by not having Spell Thieves. Maybe if you have something like Draven and you're counting on this guy, he's a Draven one trick, he's going to put up some big damage and you're going to get kills off that extra Spell Thief damage. But overall, I just don't think it's going to be worth it. You need those wards. You're going to get them usually at least 3 minutes faster. Sometimes in really tough lanes, if you're against something like a Draven, Zyra, and you've got like Ezreal, Rakan, and you try to take Spell Thieves, you're not going to get your wards till like 18 minutes because you're just never going to be able to go on them. So Nomads is just secure. It's guaranteed. You're going to get paid. You're going to get those wards. And then in the mid to late game, you're going to get a lot more gold. Like with most champions, Rakan is one of them who have to choose between Nomad and Spell Thieves. That Nomad is going to give you, just look at it at the end of the game, it's going to give you over 2,000 gold most of the time. And a lot of times Spell Thief, even good Spell Thief proc's going to be maybe 1,500, 1,600. So you're going to be getting 500 or 600 more gold off of Nomad, sometimes even better than that. And that adds up. I mean, that means that you're going to, complete your second and third item a lot faster than other people. Now, yes, Spell Thieves, Frostfang does give you flat AP on it. And that's a stat that's very good. So you have to, put that in your calculus where it's like, okay, you're getting... I think is it 20 AP off of Frostfang, which is going to be like 420 gold value. You're getting that off of the item, and if you get the 50% mana regen off of that, and that converts over to AP, if you take something like Athene's, that's going to give you, an extra 10 AP, something like that, which is going to be an extra 200 gold. So all in all, like, that can be pretty good, 200, you're getting basically 500 or 600 gold in value off of Frostfang. So when you very first complete it, yeah, it's going to be worth more than Nomad, because Nomad really doesn't give you very good combat stats. They both give the same amount of health. Nomad will give you some extra health regen. It gives you blue coins for some mana regen and stuff like that. And it gives you 10 movement speed, which is not worthless. That's actually pretty good. But 10 movement speed is only going to be worth like 250 gold or so. So you're going to be down 300 or 400 gold. But by the end of the game, like I said, if you're getting an extra, like, 800 gold, 800 gold off of nomads, and that's helping you complete your redemption faster, or your Knight's Vow, or your Shirelias, or whatever you want to buy, ultimately, I think it's a better bargain. So I've just been defaulting to Nomad. So unless you know your 80 carry is going to be awesome, and you know you're going to get kills, and you really want that Spell Thief damage in the laning phase, go Nomad. You're going to get your wards faster. It's virtually guaranteed, and you're going to have a lot more gold in the mid game, virtually guaranteed, than most users. So yeah, you're not getting the synergy with the Themes. Yes, you're not putting up as much damage as you could, but overall, I think it's a better bargain. And then Zeke's is what I would rush almost always, unless you're against a heavy AP lane. If you're against something like a Zyra or a Brand, you can consider a Themes, because the Null Magic Mantle can be very handy there. But a lot of times, you're gonna want to go with Zeke's first. Then after that, kind of feel it out. I've been getting a Themes second. I think it's really nice there. If they have a ton of AD, if it's like, Talon middle and, Kha'Zix jungle or something like that, then maybe Zeke's plus Knight's Vow. Just double down on the armor, and that can be helpful. Redemption is pretty good too. That's a nice team fight option, and then you could also do Echo Shirelia's if you want to have more mobility. But I would say the vast majority of times I'm starting with Zeke's, and then I'm either going Athene's or I'm going to go Knight's Vow. If you think the game's going longer, if you get Athene's and then Redemption, that has some really good synergy. But overall, that's what I would get. Rakan, still going to be a really good champ. But let's go ahead and move on. Let's keep the Rakan talk to about 10 minutes here, and then we'll move on to everybody else. So yeah, Rakan going to be very strong right now. I've played him a lot on stream. Be sure to check that out if you want to see some more Rakan footage. Okay, let's start talking about some of these enchanters that have moved up a lot. So number one is Soraka, and this might surprise a lot of people because I've always liked Soraka. I know that Soraka is always a fan favorite on the channel, but it's been a long time since I've had her as tier 1. And one of the main reasons for that is just Sona has outcompeted her historically. Because Sona, I think a lot of times Sona just has better team fight in terms of, like, you have your ult, you have more consistent pressure in the laning phase, and just like your auras are so strong in team fights, it's just been hard to beat Sona. So I've always, for numerous seasons now, I've thought that Sona has just been more effective than Soraka a lot of times. And I think the statistics have borne that out. Sona, prior to her previous nerfs, was almost always at 54, 55%. Soraka's almost always floating around like 51%. So statistically, she's been tougher. And then over time, she's been a bit better. But some stuff has changed about Soraka fairly recently. And I talked about this stuff, but it's really added up over time, especially when you start thinking about these other shifts in the meta as well that I was just hitting on here, where the game's slowing down a little bit, which is really nice for Soraka. There have been some very specific changes as well that I think a lot of people have overlooked. Once again, I mentioned these, but I just didn't really do all the calculus and add it all up in terms of meta shifts and in terms of like Sona nerfs and just the way that the meta's been going. And I just kind of over the last couple of days I have tried her out again, and I think I've been putting some of this together a little bit better. So one thing here on 9/17, so that was just a couple of patches ago, is that she now properly heals herself for more when she's under 40% health. So a big part of Sona's R is if someone's under 40% health, I think they get healed for like 50% more healing. It's something crazy like that. Yeah, you get an extra 50% healing when you're under a certain threshold. That was bugged. She didn't actually heal herself for 50% healing. So she's getting an extra 50% healing off of her ult now on herself. And this is very common when someone tries to dive you on the back line. You blow your ult most of the time. Like, you blow your barrier, you blow your ult to try to survive. And a lot of times, you're going to be under 40% health when you use it. So this is a really big deal, especially when you start taking into account plus healing and shielding. This could be like 400 or 500 health off of this ult, this extra 50% that you're healing. So that gives you a ton of extra survivability. Just a ton. I didn't even know I was bugged before that patch. So that's a big, big deal. Basically says you heal yourself for 50% more when you're under 40% health. That's a huge amount of survivability to her kit. Also, 9/15, and I was a big advocate of this as well, the base damage on the Q was increased by 15, especially in early ranks. That is a hell of a lot of extra damage. off of her Q. So Star Call, and we'll talk about that here in a second, is a really, really good ability, and they buffed this a few patches ago as well, because it deals damage to the enemy, it heals you, and it increases your healing on your allies by a very, very large amount, and it gives them bonus movement speed, and it has wave clear, and it doesn't cost very much mana, and it has pretty good range. Like, it's an extremely strong ability, and I think just a lot of people just don't get this because they're kind of stuck in the past. Last year, maybe it was even the year before that, Soraka would max E because it was guaranteed damage, and that was back in the day when, like, Airy did way more damage, Scorch did way more damage, Absolute Focus did way more damage. All that stuff, all that poke kind of stuff, did way more damage than it does now. And there just wasn't as much lifesteal in the meta at the time either. And it did a ton of extra damage. The E did a ton of extra damage. So, I'll talk about that here in a second, but let's look at some of these changes here. So that's to Star Call, and then Rejuvenation bonus movement speed increased all the way up to a maximum of 35% versus 30%. And it decays significantly less rapidly. So I had thought that Soraka was going to be really good on 919 when they boosted the movement speed on Q. But the thing was, it would tell you, oh, we're boosting your movement speed by 30%. Then it would fall off after like 1 second. It was like 5 seconds of bonus movement speed. And it's like, okay, you get 30% for like 1 second. And then after that, it like falls down to like 5%. You know? And so it was just kind of a joke, just how fast it decayed. And I hate decaying stuff because it's tough to tell what does that even mean? Why decay? Why not just give her like 2 seconds of bonus movement speed at a flat rate? But they've been doing this with a lot of stuff, with decaying movement speed and blah, blah, blah. And it's so difficult to tell what it actually means. But anyways, I've played with it now a few times, and I can tell you it's a lot more significant. You definitely move faster. You don't keep the 30% for the whole time, but it feels like, you know, you keep a good portion of it for at least a couple of seconds instead of 1 second. So that's kind of under the hood. It's difficult to quantify that, but it certainly seems like it's a lot more movement speed. And keep in mind that also applies to any ally that you heal with W is going to get that movement speed. So we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. But this is where they kind of reworked her on version 9.9. And this is why you should get 3 points in Q and not max E anymore. So if we look at this, okay, the cooldown was changed. So it has a longer cooldown now. But the rejuvenation lasts longer. The base healing is increased by a lot. We're talking about going from 88 base healing all the way up to 140 at max rank. That's both for you and anyone that you heal. The self-healing ratio is up a lot to 0.5. The base ally healing is up a lot, over to 140. Ally healing ratio is 50% at all ranks. So this is all like massive buffs to your healing. Whenever you hit somebody with an enemy with a Q and heal your ally, it's a ton. And it's also increased on your ally up to 5 seconds at all ranks instead of 3 seconds. And now it heals more up front. So you get bigger ticks of it up front instead of evenly distributed. However, the base damage was reduced by a good chunk, by 20. So you're basically getting, 50 more healing in exchange for 20 more damage on yourself and your ally. But you also gain that bonus movement speed. You didn't used to get movement speed. Okay? And then they nerfed the Equinox. This is the big nerf here, okay? So the cooldown is down a little bit. Mana cost goes up a little bit, but this is the big ticket. This is what you got to pay attention to here, okay? So if you max this out, it only does 170 damage now. 50 damage lower. 50 damage lower than the other E. So that's the stuff that's kind of happened in Season 9 for those of you that haven't been keeping up with Soraka. I've talked about this on patch notes, but she hasn't really been very high on the tier list, so we often don't talk about Soraka. But that's kind of where we've been, where her healing is up a ton. It's just her guaranteed damage with E and her lane oppression is down a lot because they've nerfed a lot of the runes that were good on her. Like I said, the Scorch, Airy, all that stuff has been nerfed, but her healing is up huge. So she basically scales way harder, but she has a little bit less oppressive poke in the laning phase, although she has way more sustain for both her and her ally in the laning phase. So let's look here at some abilities real quickly, and then we'll move on after that. But I want to give Soraka her time in the sun here because we're bringing her out of the darkness. It's been a while. So look at this Q. Now, this is the main thing I get asked is why am I putting points in Star Call instead of Equinox? So remember the Equinox got nerfed really hard. So it only does 270 damage at max rank. It costs a lot of mana, doesn't heal you, and it's on a really long cooldown, right? 20 to 16 seconds. The Q, however, does up to 215 damage. So just straight up, the Q does 45 more damage if you max both of them out and you hit your Q. It's on a much lower cooldown. It goes down to 4 seconds instead of 16. So you could fire off 4 of these in the same amount of time it would take you to fire off 1 Equinox. So in the laning phase, even if you only hit like 1 out of 3, it's still going to do similar damage, and it's going to have the healing and all of these extra bonuses. So as long as you're hitting like 1 out of 3 of your star calls, I think it's going to be better than Equinox for Harass. Now, not only does it do damage, but it slows them by 30%, so this can help you escape. It can help you run people down, potentially. Has 800 range, which I think Equinox is longer. You have to get used to it. It's kind of weird. If they're max distance, it's going to be a 1 second delay before it hits. However, if they're in your face, it's 0.25 seconds. So it's one of the few skill shots where the actual speed of it changes based on how far you are. So you got to play it a little bit. You got to get used to it. It's a little weird. But you also heal off of this, right? So if you hit this Q, then it's going to heal the person, or it's going to heal you for 60 at level 1. If you put 3 points of this in lane like I recommend, it heals you for an extra 100 plus 0.5 of your bonus AP. So that's pretty big. And you get extra movement speed. So you get extra 25% movement speed. Now, while you're rejuvenated, you can rejuvenate allies, giving them the same effect. Now, I want you to look at this heal here real quick, okay? So even if you have 3 points of W, you know, kind of in the mid-game, you're adding an extra 100 healing on top of a heal that's only worth 140. So you're almost doubling the heal by hitting your Q first if you have points in this, if you have, you know, 3 points in this. So it's not just extra damage, it's also a lot of extra healing on you and your ally. So remember, if you Q and hit somebody, it heals you for 100 plus 50. It also heals your ally. So now the total amount of healing is 200 with a 1.0 AP ratio every time you use your W. So if you include the healing on you and your ally, you're healing like 150% what you would normally heal off of this. So that's huge. And even if this has been ticking on you, you hit your Q and you wait 4 seconds or whatever, and then you infuse them, they get the full 5 seconds of healing on top of it. So they don't miss anything. They get the full 5 seconds whenever you heal them, as long as you still have that buff. So what this also means is if you land the Star Call in a team fight for 100 extra healing, and, you know, late game, this is down to 2 seconds, and you're going to have some CDR as well to probably bring it down to like 1.5 seconds. That means that you land 1 Star Call, you can probably heal 2, maybe even 3 people with this, which is going to give off an extra 300 healing with an additional like 1.5 AP ratio. That also scales with plus healing and shielding, it scales with revitalize, and it scales with your AP. That's a lot of extra healing. Spoiler alert, that's a hell of a lot of extra healing. So that's why this is so good, is it's not just that, yes, it gives extra poke in the laning phase on a low cooldown, but it heals you and it heals your allies, which is really good in the early game and really good in the mid to late game. This is going to be worthless to spam that. Like, you can't spam this in a team fight. You're casting this once, okay? 18-second cooldown, most team fights, you're going to cast this once, okay? And if you max this out, I guess 16-second cooldown, if you max it out, it's like, okay, you do 170 damage with a 0.4 AP ratio. Maybe you can hit 2, possibly 3 enemies with this if everyone's grouped up, so you do some extra damage. However, this thing, you know, you land that Star Call, it's a 4-second cooldown. You can land this multiple times. You can hit 2 or 3 of these in a fight, and while your heal is empowered, you know, you're healing for effectively an extra, you know, every time you land that, like 300 extra healing. And you can cast this a lot. You can spam a lot of Astral Infusions. So just trust me, this version right here scales way, way, way harder than getting Equinox. You're pretty much all in on the laning phase with Equinox. And even then, like I said, this does more damage on a lower cooldown. Even if you just don't even care about the healing. 215 versus 170. You can cast this 3, maybe even 4 times sometimes in the amount of time it would take you to cast one of these. So it's more damage, it's more healing, and it's more speed. when you're in a team fight and you've got 3 points in this, you're handing out 25% bonus movement speed for 5 seconds like candy to all of your allies. It's like you're giving free like karma shields out to people, or free, like Nami bonuses to people. Now, they don't keep the 25% for the entire 5 seconds, but they get a good 1 or 2 seconds of very significant movement speed, in addition to you having movement speed so you can kite. And you're slowing down the enemy so they can't get away. Just so many good things come out of this ability, especially after the buff. It's huge. So you want to make sure that you're landing your Qs in the laning phase, and then once you have that buff, that's when you heal your ally. So unless they are in immediate mortal danger, do not use this on your ally unless you also land your Sarkol first. Bonus points if they are under 40%, so that you get the extra rejuvenation healing off of it. Yeah, that's something that's changed materially this season, which makes her way, way more powerful. And then, of course, you have your ult, and if they're below 40%, then they get bonus healing off of this. Now, this also scales with plus healing and shielding, and AP, and Revitalize. So if someone's under 40% health, they're going to get 15% extra healing from Revitalize. You're probably going to have at least 10%, maybe even 20% plus healing and shielding, and it also applies Athenes to them. So if you have, 200 Athene stacks, then they get the Athenes plus the Wish. All of that is increased by 40%. And then that's increased by an additional 15% from Revitalize. It's just nuts. Like, the healing off of this is just insane, like, on a team fight. So this immediately erases a lot of spike damage, a.k.a. Malphite. Like, this is the main reason I decided to try out Soraka again, is Malphite's so popular. If he doesn't ult you, he ults your ally, you start a redemption tick down. So you redemption, and then immediately cast Wish. That's going to boost everybody up a ton of healing. Use your normal heal on somebody, your W on somebody, and then the redemption hits them. And you're going to be burst healing multiple people on your team for like 2,000 health with redemption plus Wish, with all of these other modifiers. It's just crazy. You'll see them go from like 20% health all the way up to full with Soraka. And so the fact that you can do it immediately, there's no delay, there's no cooldown, it's just hell of a lot of burst healing, like right off the bat. It's just so good against things, that are trying to hard engage against like a Mumu or Malphite's the big one right now. But just really anything that's going to try to do like burst AoE type of damage. Rumble, Zyra, Brand, very good against all these. Now, yes, if they do have Morellonomicon, it is going to get reduced, and people are going to build Morello against you. But the thing is, like, it's so much, especially with Revitalize and Athenes and all of that. You're still going to be able to heal through the Morello most of the time. So that's why I've started playing her a lot more. She's just extremely good at team fights. If you can just hold people up, you're going to win the fight. It's a massive amount of healing. And the fact that you just have a much better laning phase with Star Call and Astral Infusion, just almost no one can lane against you unless they hard engage on you. You're going to win the fight. So she has a very favorable matchup against things like Janna, like Nami, like Sona, I think now in the laning phase. Sona got nerfed a few patches ago on her Q, and people just aren't picking her as much, and so she doesn't have as much competition for the scaling. She's the sort of undisputed queen of scaling for supports. Even against Janna, when Janna tries to ult, if you just hold your Equinox, you can cancel her ult. So it's very, very nice. Scales super well, and so you just want to go with Nomads for the same reason I just talked about with Rakan. You can try to go Frostfang, but Nomads is just guaranteed money, gets you those wards to keep you safe. She is pretty unsafe in the laning phase, so you want to make sure that you're keeping tabs on the enemy jungler. Now, another thing that I've started doing here as well is I've tried out a Guardian build, and I know some people have been saying, oh, Guardian's amazing for a long time. It's okay, but like the stuff that's changed, once again, is that they have nerfed Airy over time. They've nerfed pretty much everything. They've nerfed Mana Flow. They've nerfed Absolute Focus. They've nerfed Scorch. And I just don't think, especially when you have really weak lane champions around right now, when you've got a Vayne on your team or an Ezreal or a Kai'Sa, they're just not going to put up enough damage for Scorch to matter. Like, Scorch only matters if you force the enemy to take a bad back. And so if they're not taking a bad back, then Scorch is pretty worthless early on. So if your AD carry's not chipping in, if they're not poking them out and doing a lot of damage, things like Scorch and Airy just don't matter in the early game. And so taking something like Guardian is pretty good in a meta like that where there's just not enough damage. Now, if you have something like Draven or Jhin, yes, maybe you could take Airy and Scorch and it will matter. But if we look at Airy, the damage is pretty anemic after the nerfs, which were probably like a season or a season and a half ago. It's only 10 to 40 extra damage, which is okay. And one thing that I've really sort of recently kind of realized about Airy is that, like, in team fights, most of the time, your Airy is going to hit enemies. It's not going to be on your shield. So, the main reason for that is you're going to be throwing auto attacks. You're going to be throwing Qs. Like, you're going to be doing just a lot of stuff in fights. So, most of the time, the Airy is going to hit the enemy. Now, if you time it really well, if you can keep up with when Airy's coming back to you, and as soon as it comes back, then you heal, like, if you can keep up with that in a team fight, like, do all the other stuff and position correctly, and keep track of where Airy is, and sort of time your cooldowns around the Airy every time so that you do a heal and apply Airy, yeah, it's probably pretty good. You're going to get that, 35 shield with the 0.25 AP ratio. So if you get off, like, 2 or 3 Aries in a fight, defensive Aries with the shield, then it's probably good. But, late game, if you're just going to be hitting them for an extra, like, every now and then 30 damage or something off of a normal Airy, offensive Airy, it's not as good. So if you do micro it perfectly on Soraka, and, like, every single Airy goes to a shield and not to an auto attack on an enemy, maybe it's worth. But I just feel like Guardian is much easier to manage and gives you a lot more protection yourself, because Airy can never shield you, but Guardian can shield you, and it can shield an ally. So if we look at Guardian's numbers, it's 70 to 150 with a 0.25 ratio. So look at Airy there, it's going to be 35 to 80 with a 0.25 ratio. So you're basically going to need 2 Airy shields to come off, like defensive Airy shields, in order to match one person's Guardian. And keep in mind, Guardian applies to both you and the person that you're healing. So that means that basically you're going to need 4 Aries. If you Guardian both people, that's going to be 140 to 300 base with a 0.5 AP ratio. So you're going to need 3 or 4 Aries to go off in a fight in order to match Guardian. And those have to be defensive shielding Aries, not auto attack. Oops, I accidentally just did 30 damage to the enemy instead of 80 shield to my ally. That just can't happen if you're using Airy. You can't mess up Guardian, really, most of the time. You just heal somebody in a fight, boom, they're going to get the bonus. Now, it does not apply with your ult, because it has to be unit targeted. So it's not the person you heal, but it has to be unit targeted. So if you ult somebody on the other end of the map, it's not going to put Guardian on them. That'd be really cool, but it doesn't do that. Okay, so keep that in mind. But this is good, and it gives you the bonus movement speed. So it gives you 20% movement speed, and it gives the person that you shielded 20% bonus movement speed. So it's just really reliable. It's just great. It helps protect you. You combine this with Barrier, which is a common summoner on Soraka, and the fact that you can now ult yourself and get 40% more healing. It's just awesome. Like, it's really, really hard to burst down Soraka if they have Guardian plus Barrier plus your ultimate. It's a lot harder than it seems to blow her up with one rotation. So that's sort of a more viable technology. I know people have always been trying Guardian. The reason you would go Airy in the past is because you could combine, like I've said several times, you could combine Airy with, like, Absolute Focus and something like Scorch and do, like, really, really good poke damage with your E. Guaranteed, you press E on somebody, they take, like, 250 damage in the lane from all of your runes. It was really good, but all of that's been nerfed now. So I think that Guardian is something that's really strong. And then Font of Life is actually pretty good too, because whenever you hit somebody with a Q, that means everyone on your team, regardless of whether or not you're healing them, everyone can get that Ardent Sensor buff if you go for that. And all of the extra healing that you hand out off of Font of Life does use your Athene stacks. It does benefit from your plus healing and shielding. It does benefit from Revitalize. So you've got a lot of extra healing stuff going on there. So it's not a ton of healing, on an individual level. Your ally might be healing for, like, maybe 10 to 15 damage per auto. But if they're also getting healed for an additional, 10 to 15 off of your Athene stacks, and, they're getting the bonus off of Revitalize, and there's 5 people doing that, well, now every time your team collectively, hits these people that have Font of Life on them, and they're healing between 50 to 100 per like collective volley of auto attacks, that all of a sudden starts adding up pretty quickly, because you know your Q is on such a long cooldown and you can hit multiple targets with it, that you can have font up pretty reliably on a lot, like multiple targets in team fights. So that's particularly good on Soraka. You can take bone plating, of course, to protect you against all-ins, or if you're against something like a Nami or a Lux or just some other poke type of champion, you can actually take second wind as well, which will help out. And then, of course, revitalize is pretty much mandatory. It's really OP on Soraka. And then that frees you up to take a different secondary, because if you go sorcery, then you have to go... if you go sorcery primary, then you have to go resolve secondary to get revitalized. But now that you go resolve primary, you can go a different secondary. So I highly recommend going domination with ulti hunter. Now this is another thing that has been buffed significantly over time. It used to only be 15%, and they buffed it twice over the last year and a half to now be 25%. And you get a lot of these stacks with Soraka because you can ult and, you know, heal everyone on the map. So then you can go ahead and pick up one of these ulti hunter stacks from your top lane, right? Or from your mid lane or whatever, very early on in the game. And so that's really handy, and you have such a powerful ult. Like, it completely swings team fights. You can influence the entire map with this ult. It's a very, very strong ult if you learn how to interpret your mini-map and use it at clutch times to save teammates. So it's really handy, super powerful, and remember, this bypasses traditional cooldown reduction. So even if you already have 40% cooldown reduction in the end game, this Ultimate Hunter is going to give you even more. Now, it stacks multiplicatively, not additively. So if your cooldown's on like 100 seconds and you've got 40% normal CDR, that's going to take it down to 60-second cooldown, and then it's going to check the 25% off of Ulti Hunter, which would reduce it by another 15. That would take it down to 45 seconds total, versus if it was 65 total percent additive, then it would take it down to 35% of the original cooldown. So it's not as good as just adding on more flat CDR, but it's still pretty damn good. It's still pretty good. And especially if you're taking something like Moby Boots, which is usually what you want to take on her unless you need a defensive boot. You know, you're not going to have a ton of CDR with the build. You'll have some, but it's really nice to have that. And so, second, I like going Taste of Blood. It just gives you some extra healing in the laning phase for really good trading. But I think you could also make an argument for Ghost Poro, especially if you're going Nomad's Medallion, because you're gonna get the wards off of that really quickly, and then all you have to do is just set down wards, and then just whenever they time out, then you get free AP. You get 2 extra AP per timeout. And so if you're just putting down wards and they're just naturally timing out over time, all you have to do is really get down like your 1 minute wards early, and then just 2 rounds of your 2.5 minute wards. So just like 5 minutes or so, and then boom, it's going to be completed most of the time. So that's an extra 30 ability power, which is really nice. And then throughout the entire game, you still get that little bit of extra vision from Ghost Poro, which is not insane, but it's okay. The main thing, though, that you need to know about this is it gives you 30 ability power, usually pretty comfortably by 15 to 20 minutes. So that's actually more than Gathering Storm, faster than Gathering Storm. Usually Gathering Storm, you'd have to be over 30 minutes in order to get that kind of AP. Gathering Storm at 20 minutes, I believe, gives you 24 AP, and at 30, it gives you 48. But in the 15 to 20 mark, you can get 30. And it gives you bonuses like you can come to lane and really quickly pick up 4 ability power if you just put your ward like right where they're going to start farming in the middle of the lane. If you don't think you're going to get ganked, the Poro will show up. If it spots somebody, then you're going to get 4 AP right off the bat, level 1. And that's almost like 80 gold level 1 just for free. And if both people are standing there, you can actually get 2 triggers. If that Ghost Poro, like when it goes off, there's multiple people in the radius, then it gives you multiple ticks. So you could actually get 3 stacks, like basically right when your minion wave comes to the lane. I have a whole video about Ghost Poro if you want to watch that out, when they just did the rework of it earlier this season. So I think that's something that a lot of people sleep on. It could be really good with her. Taste of Blood's also pretty good. But you have a lot of good options here. I wouldn't go Presence of Mind just because she can't really benefit that much from Legend Tenacity. I mean, maybe if they have a ton of CC and you think you can actually survive. But Coup de Grace is not going to be that helpful. So, Ultimate Hunter, especially once this gets stacked up, once you get 4 stacks on it, it's going to be the equivalent of getting 2 assists off of this. So, I don't know. Presence of Mind is really good. I just don't think these are okay. But maybe in some matchups you could go Presence and Tenacity. But yeah, opens up some really good options there. So yeah, I recommend Guardian, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Revitalize, then Taste of Blood, Ulti Hunter, and then items, Nomad, just Athene's Unholy Grail, Redemption, Ardent Censer is going to be where it's at. So yeah, I think she's very, very good. The only thing you have to watch out if you still see someone who's running like double assassin split push comp like earlier tonight. We ran into, I like blind picked a Soraka early and the enemy team picked Fizz middle, Kha'Zix jungle, and like top lane Riven. It was a nightmare. So you got to make sure that they're not going like ultra like double assassin with a splitter. Otherwise, I think she's actually pretty good right now. She's good against tanks and she's good with tanks, or just stuff that doesn't one-shot people in 1 second. Okay, so that's Soraka. There's her, about 20 or 30 minutes of fame there. But that's something that'll also apply to a lot of these other champions as well that we'll mention. So Janna's another one, and I think Janna's like one of the best blind picks right now. I think she does get outscaled by Soraka, but she's a lot safer because she can actually function against things like Kha'Zix and Fizz. And she's kind of the queen of the roost right now. Now, what makes Janna really strong, and I'll just tell you, I've been practicing the same rundown with her in terms of like going Guardian, then Taste of Blood, Ulti Hunter, for the same reasons, basically, is that Aerie is just too hard to manage in late game team fights. It's going to get wasted on auto attacks most of the time. This is particularly true with Janna because her shield is on a much longer cooldown. With Soraka, you get the heal every like 1.5 seconds or so, so it's more likely you're going to get the shield off of Aerie rather than the auto attack damage. But still, I think Guardian's nice. It helps, the same thing I talked about before. It helps protect you. It helps give you movement speed, your ally movement speed. It's roughly equivalent to 3 or 4 Aeries, defensive Aeries in a team fight. Now, it is on a longer cooldown, but like I said, even if you get 3 Aeries off in a fight, a lot of times it's still not going to equal Guardian. So that's important to note. Remember, it also is 12% of your bonus health goes into Guardian. And you don't get a lot of bonus health, but even if you just, upgrade your ward item to tier 2, that's 200 bonus health. And then if you get, like, Redemption, that's another, I think it's 200 bonus health off of Redemption. So that's 400, and then you get 12% scaling on Guardian. Yeah, so, I mean, that's extra 48 shield. I mean, that's not nothing. That's significant. And remember, that shield applies to 2 people. So it's effectively like what would be 96 shield off of Aerie. So it's pretty dang good. Pretty dang good. And then Font of Life is actually quite nice on Janna as well because she doesn't have a comfortable way to trigger it on everybody. Like, you can ult and heal everybody or hit them with a redemption or something, but like those are long cooldowns that you really need to hold for strategic moments. But if you use your W and just slow somebody on the front line and everyone auto attacks that person, then they're all going to be able to get the Ardent Censer buff, which is really nice. And then, yeah, just Bone Plating, Revitalize, and then same drill. You can either, I like Ulti Hunter on her, even though you're not using your ult proactively. So it's going to be off cooldown, like, more often than Soraka's is, because Soraka, you can always find a place to use it on the map, typically, pretty shortly after it's off cooldown. Janna, you're going to be holding your ult for, like, key moments a lot more, but still, you want that ult. Like, it is a big, big deal if that ult is up in a fight, so I still think it's worth going Ulti Hunter on her. And then Taste of Blood does help you with healing. That's very nice in the laning phase, especially because you don't have your own heal. Soraka heals herself, Janna doesn't. So that's really handy, but you also could consider Ghost Poro if you don't need to heal. If you're against an all-in like a Nautilus or a Leona, you may not need that sustain off of Taste of Blood because you're either going to be sitting at full health or you're going to get 100 to 0'd. So that's something to think about. And Janna scales really well with AP also. Well, yeah, why Janna, like, why would you pick her over Soraka? I mean, the main thing is she's just way safer. Like, she's very fast with her W, with her passive. She has multiple ways to peel. So she has Howling Gale. This ability is so strong if you use it correctly. It's basically like a Thresh Flay, but it's a little bit easier to use. It's, I guess it's on a slightly longer cooldown. But it can also function as wave clear if you really need for it too, although that's kind of weird. You can wave clear with it. But this just stops so many things that are coming at you. It stops Lee Sin kicks, Jarvan, trying to flag and drag, Nautilus hooks, Leona, trying to come in and hook somebody. Rengar trying to jump out of invisibility, Kha'Zix trying to jump on you. There are so many things that this can help prevent. And Janna can cast all of her stuff while she's moving. I don't know if it says that on here, but that's definitely a huge perk of Janna if you've never noticed that. And she can actually cast most of her spells while she's still moving. So there's no animation to use your tornado. You can still keep running backwards and throw your tornado in a completely different direction. She doesn't even stop moving to do it. And that's something that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a really subtle thing, but it adds up a lot. It means that you're able to kite better than almost anybody as a support. So it gives you a lot of peel. It can hit multiple targets. It's really underrated. The W is okay poke. The main thing is it just allows you to zip around the map a lot faster. Eye of the Storm surprisingly helps your AD carry scale a ton. And this is the line of text people forget about. Everyone thinks, okay, it's a big shield. You see that, that's strong, that's good. And it is. It is those things. But it also gives usually 50 to 60 extra AD to your AD carry. That's a BF sword and a half. I mean, AD is valued at 35 apiece, I believe. So if we're talking, you're giving your AD carry like 55 in the mid game. Let's say that you have, your Athenes plus part of like an Ardent Censer or something like that. You're basically handing your AD carry almost 2,000 gold. So it's just like, here's 6 kills on the house. Oh, I've got Ardent Censer also? Okay, here's another 6 kills on the house worth of free stats. So you're just like handing out, thousands and thousands of gold to your AD carry. And, that can critically strike too. So, just think of this. When this is maxed out, if you're handing off like 50 bonus AD, let's say that your AD carry has like, 2 crit items or whatever, they're going to be a 50% chance to crit. So that means that on average, it's going to be 75 damage per hit, not including Infinity Edge multipliers. But on average, 75 damage per hit. And then this is up for 5 seconds unless it gets broken. Let's say they get off 5 auto attacks in 5 seconds, which is not unreasonable. It's pretty likely that they're going to do that. They're probably going to get more than that. That's 375 damage that you're doing on this ability. So just imagine that this reads, deals 200 or shields for 220 and does an extra 375 damage. That's crazy. And that also affects abilities, like AD abilities. So it gives Zed and Talon and Kiana and all these champions, Kha'Zix, Rengar, gives them a lot more burst. It's not just autos. Everything gets this benefit of AD. Lee Sin, anybody. So that's extremely powerful, and a lot of people totally forget that. Like, you'll melt turrets with this, you'll melt Baron, you can throw it on AD assassins and melt, stuff with that. And they just recently made it to where if you displace somebody, then the cooldown is reduced by 20%. So if you're hitting people with tornadoes in your ult and stuff like that, then it goes even lower than a 12-second cooldown. So as long as you are hitting one person with a tornado in a fight, then you're going to lower this down by 20%, which is going to be like a little over 2 seconds, like 2.2 seconds. So it's really, really good. And then, of course, your ultimate completely resets fight, pushes everybody back. If people actually manage to survive a Malphite ult, then you can push them back with Monsoon and heal. The difference between this and Soraka is Soraka's is instant and gets an extra bonus on low targets and is global, versus Monsoon resets the situation, pushes everybody back. Although, if they're able to stand in it the whole time, Monsoon is probably going to heal them for more if every single person on your team stands in it than Soraka. It just takes 3 seconds to complete the healing. So, it's kind of a trade-off. It's a little bit more conditional. You're going to be a lot more vulnerable because people can jump on you or interrupt you with whatever when you channel it. But it's still super strong. It can stop that Kha'Zix or that Rengar from jumping on your AD carry, where they might literally one-shot your AD carry if you don't do that. So the Soraka heal wouldn't matter because they're going to go 100 to 0 in 0.1 seconds. So she's just a lot better against highly mobile, high-damage champs, especially assassins. So both of those are pretty good. Soraka's going to scale harder if she just gets to sit there and heal the whole fight. But Janna is going to be much more well-rounded, especially against diver teams. So you got to be careful with Janna, though, that your team has better scaling. So you got to make sure you have the Jinx, you have the Twitch, you have the Kai'Sa, something like that. Because if you have Ezreal on your team and they pick something like Jinx, you might have a problem. You might have a problem because Janna doesn't have any way to engage or like hook people or anything like that. So that can be a problem, but she's very, very strong in this meta right now because you're just going to get to farm off in the lane and just hard scale and protect your AD carry while they scale over time. So, because a lot of the popular AD carries are really good later in the game. It's just a question of whether or not they can get there. So, adding in that extra bit of scaling is very nice. Okay, Nami is another one who's pretty strong, and Nami is probably one of the more well-rounded supports out there. She doesn't scale as hard as Janna or Soraka, and the main reason for this is just her ratios aren't as good, and she has longer cooldowns, so she doesn't give any bonus to the AD carry like Janna does in terms of raw AD, and she can't heal every 2 seconds like Soraka can, doesn't have as much as raw healing, but what she does have is a lot of CC. So you've got your bubble, which can help you make some plays in the laning phase. So she's a lot better with, like, if you really want to put up a bunch of pressure and bully people out. So if you have, like, a Jhin or a Draven or something on your team and you want to go for that early pressure, or Lucian, she's great with Lucian, and you can consider running with Nami. So she's got the bubble. It's a 1.5 second stun. Really nice. Gets around minions. You can throw this anytime, anywhere. Can potentially hit multiple targets. You have your ebb and flow, which not only damages the enemy, but also bounces back to heal you. So it's very simple. It's a point click. You can't miss it. It's super reliable. It's okay if they hit you back because you're going to get the healing off of it. So it's very, very easy just to walk up through the minion wave and just trade with this because it's just point click. It's not targeted. So just very, very consistent harass and healing. Tidecaller's Blessing. She just controls movement really well, so you can speed up your allies. Anytime your allies hit somebody, they're going to be slowed down with Tidecallers. So, you know, that's just really good for, you know, sort of dictating the pacing of fights. And then you have Tidal Wave, which is really good follow-up CC. It moves very slowly, so it's not great if you're the first person to cast. But if you have a Hecarim running in, or you have, like, a Jarvan that's about to dunk somebody or something like that, or a Malphite who's about to ult, using that Tidal Wave as sort of follow-up is really nice. Or if you're about to fight in, like, a choke point or something where it's going to be really difficult for them to dodge, Tidal Wave can be pretty good. It's on a low cooldown. It not only knocks people up, but it slows them down by a ton for quite a long time. So, she's also pretty good. Now, I don't know. With her, if you'd want to do Airy or Mana Flow, honestly, haven't tried Guardian with her. It's a little more questionable just because you are trying to harass early and you have such awesome harassment that you actually can proc Scorches really reliably. Airy, you do need the mana because your stuff is kind of expensive early on, and you want to be proactive. You want to be casting W every single time it's off cooldown. So things like Mana Flow are better because you're going to heal yourself off your W. You're going to keep yourself over 70%. That's going to make Absolute Focus a bit more appealing. So I think with her, you still might want to do Sorcery just because she's so good early. But I could definitely see an argument potentially for Guardian in certain matchups. So, you know, I'll have to experiment and try that out. For the same reason, I think that Frostfang is something you want to do with her just because it's so easy to trigger that with her in the laning phase. So you shouldn't be that far behind Nomad in terms of wards, maybe only 1 or 2 items, and you can really leverage that AP early. So if you want the bully, who's also an enchanter, that's just very reliable, very strong, it's got a lot of CC, Nami can be good, especially with champions like Lucian, like I said before, because his double shot will trigger your E twice, so you get to put that damage out a bit faster. And Vayne is also really good with her because just being able to control that pace, just being able to slow people down with the Tidecaller's Blessing so Vayne has more time to hunt them down and dodge a bunch of stuff is going to be really handy. So, pretty good overall champ. Pretty nice if you're afraid, if you want that early game aggression, but you're sort of afraid of potential engage, then she's got some tools for that. So, I think that Nami is definitely going to be pretty strong right now. And we'll talk a bit faster about the next ones. I ended up going on to Soraka for a long time, but the thing is, I think that's a major paradigm shift in terms of the meta and in terms of the runes and how you play her and stuff like that. So I think it was worth the discussion. Zyra, same drill as usual. Very good early game aggression. Really good against all-in champs, particularly Thresh or a lot of those hook champs, because her plants block hooks. So if you spawn a plant like right in their face, you hit them with a Q plant and they try to hook you, it's just going to hook the plant instead of you. So that works very well against Thresh, Pyke, Nautilus. It doesn't work against Leona. Leona's very difficult to deal with for Zyra after the changes to Leona's W, because Leona's W like blocks a ton of the plant damage. We'll talk about Leona here in a second, but against most of those all-in champions, she's going to be pretty good. And if they do decide to all-in you or all-in your AD carry, you know, you just roll your hand across the keyboard, grasping root, put up 2 plants, ult. It's going to delete them. It does a ton of damage early on, and it keeps everyone else out of the fight. It just zones everyone, because if the AD carry wants to go in there and follow up the support, like Nautilus hooks your AD carry, and that Vayne's thinking about going in there, you know, when you completely, like, put up these plants and delete the support, they're going to have to back up. So, just really good burst damage, really good zone control. You have really good vision control as well with rampant growth. As the game goes on, you can spawn plants and bushes. It saves you wards. It allows you to contest control wards without losing vision, because remember, the plants their vision does not get locked out by a control ward because they're not considered wards. So it still gives you full vision of the area. It's invulnerable when you're fighting over, or invaluable, I should say, not invulnerable, when you're fighting over wards later. So it's really handy. The problem with Zyra is that if you don't get kills early, you will fall behind the enchanters. So you can blow them up. Like, you have a ton of damage. They're not going to be able to heal through it. Now, if they're going Guardian, and if they're going Barrier, it's going to be hard to blow them up. I'm going to be honest. It's going to be really hard to blow them up with that build. But most enchanters aren't going to be doing that yet unless they watch my videos, or unless they're one of the few people that was recommending Guardian. And remember, Guardian has not always been this good. I know there'll be someone that said, I've been doing that for years, you know. It really hasn't. It's been, like, okay in some circumstances, but it's really just the nerf to a lot of the other runes over time, and the buffs to some of these secondaries like Ulti Hunter, that have made this a bit more viable. And in terms of, like, the meta itself, just kind of how that has shifted to where there's just so much upfront damage right now in this meta that you need Guardian to help protect you. But anyways, really good poke in the laning phase. Really good all in. It's just you need to, you know, if they have something like a Soraka, you're going to have to get that Morellonomicon really quickly. But you can burst them. You can get ahead. She is very good against things like Thresh, Pyke, Nautilus. And I recommend still going Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, and Scorch. You just want the maximum amount of harass that you can get. And then I like Ulti Hunter on her as well. Your ultimate is very powerful. It is very important. You could also try Coup de Grace and Presence of Mind if you want. And kind of like for an older school build, you can go for like Boots plus Cosmic Insight. But I think after all the nerfs to like Boots, it's just not going to be as good. That's another thing that changed with the support meta from earlier on the season. You used to pretty much have to buy or like take Boots Biscuits because that was just the best. So you weren't able to take things like Ulti Hunter and Taste of Blood earlier. So anyways, very good, but she gets outscaled. Her items are really expensive. You're going to be paying, you know, somewhere between 2,700 and 3,100 gold for your items, whereas enchanters are going to pay like 2,100 to 2,300 for their items. So you're just going to get outscaled most of the time. So you better dominate. You better take over early. But if you do that, then you can still get a lot of wins with Zyra. It's just you're going to be working uphill if you don't get ahead early. Okay, next few champions, and then we'll go ahead and end this hopefully around like 1:15. I know I spent a lot of time on the enchanters, but frankly, most people probably want to hear about that because this has been a few key shifts over the past few days that I've just kind of realized. So Pyke, still pretty good. He's going to be banned a lot, so he's banned 50% of the time. Pyke is probably the best hook champion right now against enchanters because he has so much burst and because his ult goes through shields. So it makes him particularly good against Janna. Janna could put a 1 million shield on somebody, but if they're within that execute range, they're getting executed. So it's really, really good against shields. And like he's pretty safe as well, so you can play really far forward and fish for those hooks and still escape. And if your team doesn't follow up on your hook or whatever, no big deal. You don't have to go in if you don't want to. That's a really nice benefit of both Pyke and Thresh, is you don't have to go in, and that's why they're ranked a little bit higher on my list. But yeah, he does have the potential to snowball as well, because you get so much extra gold that allows you to scale and keep up with some of the enchanters, at least a little bit in terms of gold. So yeah, a lot of your items, you're going to want your Ghost Blade, your Dust Blade, stuff like that. It's going to be 2,900 gold, but, if each item, you're getting a kill or an assist, every like 5 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes, every time you need to get an item, then you're going to be getting an extra, like 500 600 gold towards those items. So it's really like his items cost like, you know, maybe 2,300 gold, even though the price tag is 29. If you're being aggressive, if you're getting those ults off, then you're going to be getting, you know, like a 600 gold discount, 500 or 600 gold discount on most of your items. Now, if you get multiple kills, if you get 2 kills while you're building towards Ghostblade, then it's definitely going to be worth it. Then you're only going to be paying, you know, like 1,600 gold versus the 2,900 gold sticker price. So I think that allows him to scale and keep up. He can also roam really well. So you can go invisible, get around wards, you know, make plays on mid lane, roam up to top lane, make a play, you know, invade with your jungler. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with Pyke if you're really good on him to just snowball in solo queue. So you could just close out the game and just make it to where, you know, the Janna and the Soraka never get to 2 or 3 items. It's just the game's over. So very good champion, especially if you have someone who's aggressive early. So he's awesome to pair with things like Jhin, Draven, Misfortune, just a lot of these bullies in the laning phase. He's going to be pretty good. Now, Thresh, and then on Pyke, you're just going to be going Aftershock, Demolish, and then Bode Plating, Unflinching, and then just Presence of Mind, Legend Tenacity. And then you just want those mobility boots. I like Targons. You can go coin if you want on Pyke. I think you need the damage. You need to get those kills. I would go Relic if I were you. But it's up to you. And then it's Duskblade, Ghostblade, Edge of Night. You know, coin works on some of the enchanters just because sometimes you can't trigger spell thieves in certain lanes. It's just too risky. You're getting camped or whatever. But like Relic Shield, you should always be able to get those stacks. As long as you're last hitting the cannons, you're going to get those stacks, and you should get that evolved pretty quickly. So yeah, that's Pyke. I think he's going to be pretty strong. He's going to continue to be strong. He has been strong. He's only got like a 50% win rate, but if you're good on him, you can definitely make him work. He's just a bit riskier. Then you have Thresh. I like Thresh a lot right now. He has a very favorable matchup into Rakan, who's very strong, and you don't have to take his hook. So you can, you know, if you land those hooks, you can take it. If you land a Death Sentence on someone like a Janna or a Soraka, you're probably going to kill him, but you don't have to go in if you don't want to. If you notice that the enemy jungler's there or your team just is not looking like they want to follow up, you don't have to go in on it. So I think that's really handy. He also doubles as a peeler. So he's both offense and defense. So he can protect your Jinx. He can protect your Twitch. He has a peel with his Flay. It's very similar to Janna's Tornado. Stops a lot of movement. You have your Lantern. If you're getting camped bot lane, you can help your AD carry get out. So he's just very flexible. He's got defense. He's got offense. So he's probably the most well-rounded support in the game at being able to play both roles, engage and peel. And the price of that, though, is he's really hard to play. His hook is one of the hardest to land. It's a very slender hitbox, and it has a half a second delay. The Flay is really quick, and it's difficult to use for a lot of people. And he just doesn't scale that well. You know, he does get the soul mechanic, so he gets a little bit of extra armor, but realistically, that's not that much more armor typically than a normal support like a Nautilus or a Leona is going to get per level anyways. You're going to have to collect on average something like 5 souls, I think, per level to match the per armor level that someone like Leona would get. Maybe it's 4 souls, something like that, depending on the champion. So you're not going to get that much of an advantage over time, and he doesn't really benefit from the melee stuff as well. Like, he can't get Relic Shield comfortably. He doesn't benefit fully from Knight's Vow because he's considered a range champ, not a melee champ, and that's a core item on a lot of tanks. So he's got some problems there. So usually he has to get some janky items like Redemption, which is not amazing on him, but it's okay. So his itemization is not very good. His ult is on a long cooldown, and it's frankly just not that good compared to most other tanks. It's like 140 seconds, and it's very conditional. It's really close range. So, you know, not a great ult. So doesn't scale super well with Zeke's. Can't really use Presence of Mind. So, you know, a lot of the best like runes that are really popular right now, and we're kind of in an ult meta where you get something that allows you to have more cooldowns on your ult and you run around and do stuff with it. Whether it's Presence of Mind, Ulti Hunter, whatever else. That's just kind of where we are. If you look at all these champions, they have great ults. Nami kind of is an exception there. But 4 or 5 of these champions have great ults. Pyke has a great ult. Nautilus has a great ult. Sona, Leona, great ults. Thresh, not so much. So that's just his major issue is he doesn't scale that well. But if you're landing your hooks, if you're saving allies with your lantern, if you're stopping movement with Flay, you know, he still can be a powerhouse. You just need to make sure you have a lot of practice on him. But I do think that he is pretty strong right now because he has good matchups against things like, you know, Leona and Pyke because he can stop their movement. But he also has, you know, pretty reasonable matchups against things like Soraka, Janna, Rakan, because if you're landing those hooks, you're probably going to kill him. So he's one of the few champs that's good against pretty much everything if you're really good on him. Not such a great matchup against Zyra or Brand, but otherwise, pretty good matchups. Nautilus is the other one who's really hot right now, and he does have one of the highest win rates. And you might wonder, well, why is he not up more? There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is, first of all, let me talk about what's positive with Nautilus. So, and then we'll talk about why I've got him in tier 2 instead of tier 1, when a lot of tier lists will have him in tier 1. Biggest thing is he has a short cooldown ult, 120 seconds, is guaranteed to hit, you're not dodging it. Unless the person has like Hourglass, or one of those stasis types of effects, then this is going to hit them. So it doesn't matter if it's like a Fancy Foot, you know, Vayne, Lucian, Ezreal, like all these highly mobile champs, they're still going to get hit. Everyone gets hit by this. And it can hit multiple targets. So if you like press it on the back line at 825 range, it's not only going to hit that, you know, Jinx on the back line, but it's going to hit everything on the front line. It's going to hit the Darius. It's going to hit, you know, the Thresh. It's going to hit all the stuff on the way as well. So typically it knocks up 2 or 3 people in a fight for a pretty long time. They're stunned for 1 second when they land. The duration, you know, in the mid game is going to be 1.5 second knockup. And it's important to note this is a knockup. It is not reduced by tenacity. So any of those supports that are going to be taking tenacity runes, or if you have a support or an 80 carrier, just anyone else is getting like Mercury treads, knockups are not reduced. And remember that you always get a half a second like minimum on all CC. So even if they have 100%, well, not 100%, but even if like not an Olaf ult, but even if they have 99% tenacity, they're still going to be stunned for half a second on depth charge. So really powerful ult. You can use it on cooldown. It's almost guaranteed to give you a kill most of the time. And he just has a lot of CC. Your staggering blow is like free extra CC on every auto attack. Your dredge line is a pretty nice piece of CC. Your Riptide is a slow. Your depth charge, you know, is a lot of CC. So he's just a CC buy. He's got a lot of that going for him. This dredge line is really easy to hit too. Open field has a massive hitbox, and it just has like, you just throw it almost instantly. If you're used to having to charge up like a Thresh hook, or you're like wind up a or charge up a Pyke hook, or wind up a Thresh hook, or whatever, this is going to feel really, really fast, and the hitbox is massive. It's way bigger than most other hooks. So this is super simple to land on most people. The problem with this hook, though, is it does not go through walls, and if you hit a wall or something like that, then it pulls you to it. So if you try to hook that person, and they're standing under tower, and you're trying to hook the 80 carry to pull them off the tower so you can kill them, and they flash it, and you hook the tower, you're going in next to that tower. And if there are no minions there, you're taking tower shots. So, not that I've ever done that or anything before. Yeah, I have. I think most people who play Nautilus have done that on accident, the oops hook. So that's a risk that you have that most other tanks don't have. On the flip side, though, you can hook to get out of situations. So if you're getting chased by somebody, you know, you can dredge line hook and potentially escape. So that is pretty handy. So it's kind of a weird hook. You have to get used to it. You have to step around minions. You can't go through minions. You can't go through walls. So it does have some limitations, but it does double as an escape. So that's kind of like a pro and a con to him. The big thing is like this shield is terrible. Like that's really what it comes down to in Nautilus, is that he is much, much squishier than most other tanks, like than Leona, even Pyke, because he doesn't have any way to heal himself either. So he doesn't have like Alistar's Roar. He doesn't have Pyke's sustain off of his passive. He doesn't have like Rakan's Q or Rakan's shield or whatever. He just like gets poked out by a lot of champions in the laning phase. And this shield is pretty terrible, so you're going to max your E first, pretty much always Riptide on him. There's an argument for maxing Q, but I think that you have to get points in this or you're just going to die. But it just feels so bad because like the base shield is 60 with a 9% of your max health. So like this shield just really feels very, very anemic. and it's on a 12-second cooldown. You don't get any more cooldown on it. So it just takes forever. Now, it used to be on an 18-second cooldown flat with no reduction. But still, you're only getting off one of these in most engages. People are going to break it almost immediately. And you're just going to get deleted. You don't have the same level of armor. You only have 39, like Leona, Alistar. A lot of these other champs are going to have like 44 base armor. So you're still pretty tanky. You're just not as tanky as a lot of other champs out there. And you have kind of long cooldowns on your CC. Like your hook's a fairly long cooldown. Riptide does do okay damage over time. It just doesn't do as much like upfront burst. So he's pretty good. It's just my thing is he's squishy and he can't like hook through walls as much. And you can't get out. So like when Rakan goes in, if your team doesn't follow, if you go in with Dredgeline, you're going in. Even if you miss the hook, half the time you're going in if you hit a wall or something like that. So that can be kind of awkward. And it just feels like he just doesn't do as much damage up front, like a lot of burst damage, as something like a Leona, who feels like she does way more damage. Pyke does a ton of damage. So he's good. He has a lot of CC. He throws it down, but he's a bit squishier. And that's, one of my main complaints about him. So he's pretty good, but Janna's going to light him up. If you don't ult that Janna, you ult somebody else, she's going to stop you a lot of times. She's going to tornado your hook coming in, and then she's just going to press R and just cancel out everything you were trying to do there. So he can be pretty good, but you got to be a little bit careful. He's pretty easy to camp as well. But yeah, I just like Aftershock, Font of Life, and then just kind of the unflinching Presence of Mind tenacity package. So pretty good if you do like Nautilus, if you do want to play hard engage. This is going to be one of the better metas for him. So he still is strong. I just think that these are just a little bit more reliable because he doesn't have any scaling either. So, if you don't kill him early and the enemy Janna gets like, Athene's plus Unholy Grail, you're going to be in big trouble. Okay, Sona, still going to be pretty good, but she has been nerfed a lot. She is very squishy. She's okay. Like, if for sure it's going to be a team fight meta, or, like, a team fight game, like, they pick Tarek and Amumu and Rumble or something like that, then she can be really good. She throws out some good harassment early on. She has her aura later on, which is pretty good. She has her ult, which is really nice. It's good to chain together with other CC as well. So if you do have like a Jarvan or an Amumu or something like that also has a lot of CC and you can follow up with yours, and that's really nice. I do think that these days the script has flipped a little bit and that Soraka's a little bit better. I think that she has better mana management early, and that Soraka's ult is like extremely powerful right now. So I think that's definitely worth considering. I think that Soraka is also a lot better with going with Barrier, although Sona is going to be better with Airy and the harassment early. So, play her at your own sort of discretion, but I think if you need that, if the AoE CC matters more to you than the Soraka's ult, the AoE healing, then you can go for Sona. Sona does get around Grievous Wounds a little bit better because a lot of her stuff is a shield. But she has to get really close to touch people with the auras for the shield, whereas Soraka can still stay a little bit further back and like use her ult and just burst heal everyone on the map. So I do think that Soraka is better most of the time, although Sona is, Sona's still pretty good too. And then finally, one of the last ones I'll talk about here is Leona. Now, Leona is very good. She did get some buffs recently to where her W is very good against different kinds of light poke, so it reduces the damage from everything by a flat amount. So if you run into someone who's going to be using like Scorch, Comet, like plant damage off of Zyra, Brand passive burning, press the attack procs, like Kai'Sa's passive, I don't know if Draven's passive would also get reduced separately. I think it would. I think a Draven auto attack, I don't know that one for sure, but just anything that's going to be doing like dot damage to you, damage over time, Leona's going to be very good against that. And the thing about Leona is she has a really, really low cooldown ult. So it's only 90 seconds on the ult, which is very handy. Has great engage range. I think it's like 1100 range. If we pull that over here, I think it's like 1100 range on that, 1200 range. So that's really handy. She can engage through minions with her Zenith Blade. Now this is kind of hard to hit. It's sort of slow when it goes out, and it's a really slender hitbox. So like good enemies will be able to juke that fairly often. But it's pretty good. They have given her several buffs. They buffed her W a ton with this flat damage reduction, which is great against, like I said, any dot damage, auto attacks, runes like Scorch, Dark Harvest, Press the Attack, just any of these runes that are doing like, you know, just a light amount of proc damage are going to be pretty, she's going to be pretty good against that. And then she's got just like, just a ton of CC, kind of like Nautilus, right? You've got your Zenith Blade, which is a half a second. This is 1.5 seconds. And then your Shield of Daybreak is 1 second. This is on a really low cooldown, though, whereas Nautilus's stuff is not as much on a low cooldown. So it's really handy. I feel like she puts out a lot more damage than Nautilus, too, if you're proccing all these Sunlight procs. I don't know exactly how much, but like level 5, you know, each one of your 3 basic abilities is going to proc it. I guess level 6, you could get a 4th proc as well. So that'd be 240 damage off your passive. And then by the time you do this whole rotation to them, you're probably going to be able to Shield of Daybreak again. So if you activate your Shield of Daybreak, you know, you Zenith Blade in, hit them with that, hit them with the ult. You know, this is going to, and you have like CDR, this is going to be down to like 4 second cooldown. You just chain stunned them for, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 seconds, and this is going to be up again in another second or two. So she's a CC machine. Really good at snowballing, super hard and engaging. It's very difficult to get away with her with Solar Flare, especially if your champion doesn't have a flash or a dash. So Solar Flare is amazing against things like Soraka, Jinx, Twitch, Janna, if she doesn't have her Tornado up. So it's just really good against a lot of immobile stuff. So she's very snowbally. She's one of the most snowbally champs in the game. But she is extremely vulnerable. Very, very vulnerable. Because you have to go in. Whenever you hit Zenith Blade, you're going in all the way 100% on top of them. And you're not getting out most of the time. So, you know, like with Pyke, like I said, you can land that hook. If you don't want to go, you don't have to. With Thresh, you land that hook. You don't want to go, you don't have to. Rakan, you go in with your W. Your team's trolling. They don't go in. You can get back out with your E. Leona, you're going in. Nautilus, you're going in. And that's why they're a lot riskier, and that's why they're a little bit further down on the list, right? But, like I said, the damage is extreme. The chain CC is extreme. You have really low cooldowns on your abilities, particularly your Q. So even after you kill one person, you can still do stuff in the fight. So I think that, you know, if you have something like a Draven, if you're very confident you're going to get a lot of kills, especially if they have a lot of dot damage. You know, they got Zyra or, I don't know which kind of other AD carry would do dot damage, but it's good. It's good if you want something that's really risky. So, Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Unflinching, Presence of Mind, Tenacity, and then Mobility Boots, Eye of the Aspect, and then just your standard Zeke's Knight's Vow package. Last few that I'll mention here, and I know we're way over time. I get asked about Lulu a lot. The problem with Lulu is she basically only has 2 abilities, like her W and her ult. Her shield is pretty lackluster. It's okay. Her Q is almost completely worthless later on. The big thing about her is her ult is considered an infusion of health. It is not a heal. Why is that important? It doesn't scale with plus healing and shielding. That is huge. That is a massive, massive nerf. That means Revitalize doesn't work with it. That means that things like Ardent Sensor and Redemption don't give it any extra scaling. So it's just really, really weak. And it has a very low AP ratio as well. So it only has like a 0.5, I think. And it's only single target. Versus you got to remember, yeah, like Soraka only probably has like a 0.5 or a 0.6 as well. But it hits 5 people on your team. And it gets, you know, 40% extra damage if they're low on health. Janna has the potential to hit 5 people with all of that healing. This is only single target. It's only a 300, and it only has a 0.5 ratio. So when we're talking like scaling and big numbers, it doesn't scale with plus healing and shielding, as I just mentioned. This just does not scale. Like, yes, it is nice. It does help versus Ignite, or if they have Grievous Wounds, if they have something like Morellonomicon or whatever, it won't reduce the healing. But it's only a single target, and it just doesn't scale, as well as a lot of the other stuff. So that's a big issue with her. You know, your shield strength is also only a 0.6. Yes, it's 220 base, but the 0.6 is pretty weak. It doesn't give any extra, like, AD, like Janna's shield does. That's pretty weak. Glitter Lance, you're only going to get 1 point in this. The slow is okay, but it decays. It's not that great later. Now, your Whimsy is very good. This is good. But the problem is you have to choose. Do you want to CC somebody, you know, for whatever, your 2.25 seconds? That's a very long stun, basically, which is good. Or do you want to give the movement speed and the attack speed to, like, your AD carry? You can't do both. So it's like, do you want CC or do you want to buff on your AD carry? And that's just what sucks, is at the end of the day, you only get to pick one of them. And so, yes, if, like, you have a Twitch or a Kog'Maw or someone who's super fed and you can put the Whimsy on them with Ardent Sensor and protect them with Wild Growth, that's great. But the thing is, Janna is similar. She can also protect. She also has a big buff she can put on someone. And she actually has 4 abilities that are all useful throughout the game. So that's just one of the main reasons why Lulu is that way. And she's also very slow, only 330. You don't have any movement speed buffs unless you use your W on yourself. So that's why. It's not that she's bad. It's just that, like, the current way that she's coded and the game works is she just doesn't have the scaling as a lot of the other champions do. So she's okay. You can definitely win games with her, but I think she's a lot more vulnerable. Lux, I thought, was still going to be pretty good after the nerfs, but statistically, she's just having some real problems right now. She can just get out-healed, out-shielded by, you know, Janna or Soraka a lot of the times. If you do hit multi-target Ws, like for multiple shields in a fight, that can be really good. You know, her stun or her root can be pretty good with her Q, but realistically, you know, there's just a lot of ifs. You got to hit a lot of skill shots, and she's just going to be pretty vulnerable, I think, right now. So she's okay. It's just there's a lot more that has to go right, and I think that she just gets outscaled and outplayed by a lot of these other champs often. But if you're really good on her, you can make her work. Bard is someone that's still up there win rate rise. I just think he's too hard to pull off. He just doesn't have enough scaling. His itemization's really weird. His runing's really weird. So if you're a Bard one trick, can you play him and win? Absolutely. For most other people, I'd probably stay away from him. Yumi is getting another mega nerf on this patch. She's getting her slow nerfed by a ton. This champion's just been nerfed by like 20 different times. She's got a 43% win rate. Can she be good? Sure, she can be, but kind of like Lux, there's a lot of ifs with her, right? It takes a lot of outplay, you know, to make her work properly, and I just think she's not worth the work right now. She's a very cool champion. I enjoy her. I think she's fun. There might be some situations and some combos, particularly with invisible champions like an Eve or like a Twitch, where she can work, but for the most part, I just wouldn't play her in solo queue. And Morgana is still pretty good against these all-in champs. You know, she's got good matchups into like Thresh and Nautilus and things like that. But she has really long cooldowns. She just doesn't scale as well as a lot of other champs. And enchanters are just going to eat her alive most of the time. They're just going to outscale her. Enchanters can also get Mikhail's to remove the bind off of her Q. So she's okay. I just think there are probably better options. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Sorry, I know this was another super long one, but it was quite a significant meta shift that I think a lot of people just aren't talking about and that I've just kind of sort of come to over the last few days. And I just wanted to explain what I thought was going on. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll try to make the other tier list shorter. I will have patch notes available on Tuesday as well. Check out the rest of the content on the channel. Come by, check out the stream if you'd like. Every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd love to have you. We have a wonderful, very chill community. I've been playing a lot more Enchanters lately, so if you're interested in that, come by, check it out, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.